the idea of kink and BDSM, and I wanted something that was a little bit of a different flavor.
Yeah, and I really think that you achieved it. You know, and I was saying before before I hit record, I have all these books. I've been sent lots of books on the subject, whether it's kink or it has to do with varying psychological components of sex, or it has to do with just general sexual communication, like just a lot, or sex education. And I was really gripped by yours and the stories that you were telling in between, because they you know, to me anyway, it just kind of wrote me in. Like I could feel my way and feel how I resonate with some components. And yeah, I would say I felt similarly at times. In Tristan Taormino's Ultimate Guide to Kink, some of
I
it.
love that book.
And then
Yeah.
I got to this section of about fisting, and it kind of just lost me for a little bit.
We can talk about that too at some point if you want.
Great.
But yeah, that's a great book, and I highly recommend it. I talk about it in my book. I love Tristan. But it's an anthology, so every chapter, every section, which are about all different kinds of kink, are different in their tone. So some are quite personal or upbeat, and some are very like how to or dark or other kinds of or not personal, technical, whatever. Um, so yeah, I mean, this book is by one person who has some various overlapping kinks and fetishes of different kinds and different kinds of sexual experiences, um but it's more from the perspective it's not a memoir, although I do tell some of my own stories, but it's really from somebody who's just been curious my whole life and excited my whole life about what turns other people on too.
Mm.
So I hope that it's got that perspective.
Yeah. And it's coming out around my birthday, I think. So it feels like a little additional celebration. And I don't know why that's totally personal to me and has nothing to do with you. And I'm like, oh, and
I
it's
love
coming out
it.
in August, it's just in time for my birthday.
It's for your
Um,
birthday.
yeah, just in this moment anyway. Okay, so let's double click a little bit. You know, I would consider myself amongst my friends, I'm probably the kinkiest. Amongst other people in the kink community, I wouldn't even say I'm like a part of the community. I would just say, like, I like some kinky fuckery from time to time. I like some, I've had some kinky, more on the kinkier side relationships throughout my life. But what other people say comprises their life and their expression and all that is very different. And so, in some rooms I'm like as kinky as it gets, in other rooms with other company I'm like as vanilla, as they've ever been able to describe it. So I would love a little taste of, you've mentioned like you were always curious. So what was it like maybe growing up, finding your way through life, being a young person, and then figuring out, I think I might be into this like kind of edgy stuff.
It's a really good question. So you had just said, something about, is kink something that you always know you have or that you can discover? And I think that's a really good question. My sense is that historically, a lot of kinky folks really feel their sexuality as an orientation analogous to knowing that you're queer when you're young. I have friends, like gay male friends, who say, when I was 5 years old, we got the Sears catalog, circular in the newspaper, and there'd be like pictures of men in underwear. And I'd be like, that's what I like. I'm 5 and I already know, like, and I am not interested in that girl that I'm supposed to think is cute in my kindergarten class or whatever. And I think often for kinky folks, it is similar, that we know from a time before we know that we're sexual beings or like have the language to talk about that. We have some awareness that what turns us on is not what turns other folks on. And it really is kind of colors our lens to the whole world, the same way I think being queer colors your lens to the whole world. Like, you sort of know the culture, the conversation wants you to have your attractions aligned this way, and your attractions are aligned a totally different way. So, but there's other folks who like later in life say, oh, hey, wait a minute, I think I might be gender nonconforming, or I think I might be pansexual, or actually, I'm interested in and attracted to other genders and orientations than I originally thought. And that, I think that happens in the kink community too, that people don't really have this kind of like core sense of themselves as different in this way, but they come along something at some point, they're like, hey, I'm kind of interested in that. I want to explore that. And of course, both are completely valid, but I am of the former camp where as a very young child, I knew that what turned me on was not stuff that was other people thought was sexual. And I've read a lot of studies and articles about this and heard a lot of other people talk about it, that you can be 9 years old and looking up spanking in the dictionary and masturbating to the dictionary definition of spanking, because that's all you got if you're into spanking and you're 9 years old, before the internet, or even if you don't have access to that. Or so much of, I would say almost every kink out there is probably represented in some children's cartoon or another, because children's cartoons are really weird. So I've heard from a lot of folks that, especially people who are into bondage and spanking, there are so many children's cartoons that represent bondage and spanking. It gets crazy if you go back and look at it. Or, cross-dressing, or all balloons, like all sorts of stuff that are pretty common kinks are, yeah. So a lot of kids, I think, have this experience of watching a cartoon, and as the plot is unfolding, they're like, wait a minute, this is my deepest fantasy, and it's not being shown here as sexual, but this is what I'm into. And having that kind of dual awareness, that sort of double consciousness, to use a phrase from race theory, like that I am both, I'm not supposed to maybe show other people that this is what I'm into, but this is what I'm into, and it's not what everybody else is into. So for me, that was my experience. I knew from a very young age, like, my fantasies don't involve genitals or like typical, kind of sexualized parts of bodies, and if they do involve bodies, then they're not the kind of bodies that are conventionally considered sexy or attractive by this culture. And so that kind of sense of like the taboo and being different was, has been with me since the start, really.
Okay. So can we get a little personal?
Sure.
Okay. So what was it? What were the things that were, like little you were like, yeah, that.
Yeah. So my kink doesn't, my fetish, which is just a sort of subcategory of kink. Fetishes are one kind of kink. And a fetish is basically when you are, find yourself really attracted to an object or a body part, that is not normally, normatively sexualized. So, and the idea of a fetish comes from that idea of like a magical totem that you would carry around with you. Like a fetish is, in folk culture, is like a little carved horse or something like that. And you would bring it for protection, and it would make you feel powerful and safe, and you loved it and sort of like worshiped it. And that is how a fetishist feels about the object of their desire. Right. So mine doesn't, there's like foot fetishes are probably the most common, and people have heard that, and you've done a show about it. Mine doesn't really have like a shorthand name like that, but I am attracted to other people indulging in hedonistic behavior. So that could be like eating indulgence, or drinking alcohol indulgence, or sexual behavior indulgence, like pleasurable hedonistic sensory pleasure, and kind of overdoing it proudly. And I will say, even though my fetish doesn't really have a name, there are lots of other people who have this. You can find them on YouTube really easily if you look up like sexy beer belly or sexy drunk girl, or like things like that. There'll be videos where people will just kind of be proudly showing off that they have engaged in this kind of vice behavior. And it's pretty taboo, right? Because we are a culture that believes in like moderation and not overdoing it, and self-discipline and things like this. And so to be into somebody being like, oh, like I just ate everything I wanted today and it was delicious and I'm so full and it feels great. That is sort of core to my fetish. And it's both the kind of physical manifestation of that. Like, I really love a beer belly, but also the psychology behind it. Like, and I'm proud of it. So there's some folks who have a similar fetish where they really love a beer belly, let's say. Gay men specifically have terms for this in gay male culture. This is a real thing that is kind of known. But they might be into like humiliating that person for overdoing it, or having the person feel humiliated or feel, not want to say it out loud. And then there's other people who are like, I really like when someone is proud of it and sort of smug about it. So yeah, I mean, from a really young age, like cartoons of Hansel and Gretel eating the entire witch's gingerbread house. And so they were like little happy, full kids. It was like,
High on
ooh,
sugar.
yeah, high on sugar. I was like, ooh, what's that about? And also some people's fetishes are, just are, sometimes you can sort of be the receiver or the giver of that. And some people it's like rooted in their own behavior. And for other people, it's like really about, I would say it's more commonly for fetishists to be interested in somebody, right? If like a foot fetishist is not really interested in their own feet, they want to watch somebody else put a shoe on. And sort of similarly for me, like, I don't really want to overdo it. I don't enjoy that myself, but I really want the other person to do it.
Yeah.
And like it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Or the latex or the leather. Granted, there are some people that like to be like strapped into the thing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, there
mostly
are.
have it seen on display.
Yeah, or like be able to, stroke it and lick it and touch it on somebody else.
Mm.
And you do get that same sense of like the original definition of a fetish of, oh wow, I'm in the presence of the sacred and this is powerful and overwhelming in a way, in a good way.
Yeah. It reminds me of I'm in Austin, right? So, you know, well, and before Austin, we spent some time in Encinitas and just outside of San Diego. So I was very woo and kind of spiritual community there. And we've got a decent sized spiritual community here too. And you're talking about the little fetish and then what I'm like, yeah, all the spiritual girls with their crystals, like
Yeah.
this is my crystal for the thing. And it's in my bra, or it's in my pocket, or it's in my wallet. And it's like, this is for my open heart, or this is for my abundance or whatever. And it's like the thing that they're, holding on to, idolizing in a sense. I grew up Catholic. And so it's like, if you put your faith into something, then this is a wrong thing. And so I imagine that there's a ton of people, there's a ton of Catholics or whatever the religion is, that's probably getting off on idolizing something other than God or Jesus out there, just to get their
Yeah.
rocks off.
But Catholics are great at this, right? Like the little piece of a nose of a saint or like this special water, and it's got all this magical power to it. And for a fetishist, yeah, it's like a magical power that this attraction has, which is part of what I think makes it so kind of intense and easy to recognize when you are a younger person. It's a pretty deep, profound feeling.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And thank you for getting personal with us, and I imagine that people are listening and they're like, I have so many questions. Like, what does this mean? Like, what does it look like? Okay, well, we're into this, and that was when you're a kid, and then now we're an adult, and like, well, how does this all play out? And so, I want to maybe double click on a couple things, and to me, I'm so curious that I want to like take it and run, but I also want to like preface some of the conversation where I know it's going, because I know the questions that I'm going to ask. Well, some of them that I might ask. And I would love, you more or less stated the differences between kink and fetish. And, we've gone into the overarching umbrella of BDSM, the acronym and what it stands for. And so for people who are not familiar with BDSM, I'll let you do the honors of what it stands for.
The great overlapping acronym. So B and D can stand for bondage and discipline, which sometimes go hand in hand, sometimes are separate. The D and S stand for dominance and submission. And then the S and the M stand for sadism and masochism. So that's great. It covers a lot of ground, but it doesn't include fetishes. So I sort of say kink is like BDS, all the stuff grouped under BDSM, which is everything from impact play, like spanking and whipping, to power exchange, sort of psychological dynamics, to some particular actions like bondage or spanking, which is part of as discipline. But none of that the letters cover fetishes, although they certainly can be a part. Like there are boot fetishists, right, who want to polish their dominance boots, or worship at their dominance feet in high heels, let's say, or the dominant want the dominant to wear latex. So there certainly can be overlap, but BDSM doesn't necessarily include or imply fetishistic sexuality. So yeah, I sort of think of a kink as like BDSM and then fetishes, and and sort of like what's between them.
Sure. Sure. And I didn't see it necessarily when I was skimming through maybe the first part of your book. Did you go into paraphilia?
Yeah, so paraphilia is sort of the diagnostic name for fetish. It's the same thing. So a paraphilia, that word just means I love the word, and it's like kind of there's riffs on it throughout the book, but it means a love, philia meaning love, para meaning next to or beyond or adjacent to. So it kind of means like love that is of things that are beyond what's normal in a way.
Right.
And
Right.
I love that term. And so that is exact, like fetishes are paraphilia. Yeah.
Right. Right. And I thought of like paranormal activity, or like, is it a
Yeah.
ghost? It's like against the norm or adjacent outside the norm. Okay. So that's like a lot of the groundwork there is like the differences in the language. And would you just say that all of them, like kind of a blanket, kinky's the word that's more or less used as the blanket, like BDSM is kinky. To some people, whatever taboo is kinky. And so to them, it might be like, ooh, you put something in my butt tonight, kinky, like, ooh, there was a little bit of, I always think it's interesting when people go to like, who like, I want to say like vanilla people, but just people who aren't very exploratory and like, yeah, let's get a little kinky tonight. And it's either butt stuff or choking. And I'm like, choking's dangerous. And we like have some things to tell you about butt stuff before you go do it.
Yeah. Like what kind of, your toy has to have a base. Yeah,
Right,
absolutely.
right.
I mean, yes, I think that, or if I wrote about this in the book, there's so many like spice up your relationship with kink articles out there, and they're all like handcuffs and play police, do a role play of some standard role play that's out there, and blindfold, and like that's kind of like the end of the story. And yeah, no, there's so much more to kink, and there's so many nuances to it, and especially when you get into paraphilia fetishes, but also with specific BDSM. For every kind of kink that's out there, there's infinite number of flavors and ways you can do that, or specifics about it. And your mileage will vary from somebody else. So just because you say like, oh yeah, I'm a dominant too, doesn't mean you necessarily have anything in common with the dominant sitting next to you, because they might be really into humiliating people who crawl around the floor and pretend they're puppies, and you're really into having being carefully shaven from head to toe by your submissive while they play like whale sounds and like candles for you or something. Like it can be totally different.
Right. And then my audience is like, I need to rewind that. What are they doing? Shaved head to toe while whale songs are playing in the background.
That was totally made up, but I mean, somebody out there's probably into it. But like the
Yeah.
example I give is often with fetishes, it's like, okay, so let's say you're a foot fetishist. Great, super common fetish, probably the most common one out there, meaning like more people are foot fetishists than maybe any other kind of fetish. But you might be a foot fetish who's really into dirty bare feet, and you just like love a hippie chick running through the grass in her dirty bare feet, and you want to like smell that dirty foot and everything. Or you might be a fetishist who's like, I like a beautifully cleaned foot, which I will bathe myself and scrub and pedicure and then slip into a beautiful $500 pair of high heels. And those two foot fetishists, they're both foot fetishists, but like the thing that turns one of them on could turn the other person off completely, and vice versa. So I think that's just really interesting, like useful to point out.
Right. And then the part where the turn on comes in, that I think for some people who wouldn't say that they have a fetish that they are aware of, which I imagine if we're adults, then chances are high if you've got a fetish connection going on, you're probably aware of it.
Yeah.
So when the turn on part happens, is it, like I imagine just like regular, normal, vanilla people kind of, just trying to bring this together here,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
they're like on, at a restaurant and they've got perfectly manicured feet in the heels and like someone has a foot fetish that like that lines up. Like, is that foot fetishist like hanging out at another table, at a nearby table, just like getting a boner or getting wet over those are really beautiful Louboutins or, Jimmy
Yeah.
Choo's or Manolo
Right.
Blahniks
Or Doc Martens. Yeah, totally. I mean,
or Doc Martens.
yeah, I mean, yes. And that is what makes it feel, I think, analogous to like knowing you're a young boy who is going to be a gay man when you grow up, because you're out in the world and everyone's saying like, oh, look at that cute girl. Look at this poster of a hot girl. And you're like, seeing the guy across, the construction worker across the street, the guy, and you're like, oh no, that is what I'm interested in. And so, yes, I think, I comment on this in the book that there are like yoga instructors who have YouTube videos, and of course they're barefoot because they're yoga instructors and they're just doing their jobs, right? But that foot fetishist might see that video and be like, this is my porn. And that's fine if that's in your head. Great, keep that to yourself. Go use it in your spank bank later. But it's what I would say is not appropriate because it's not consensual, is to then comment all over that YouTube yoga video like, oh, your feet are so beautiful, your feet are so beautiful, which people do. And it's just I would say it's not appropriate because like that person isn't putting up a video for your sexual enjoyment. They're doing a professional service, which is yoga, and you should respect that and not like kind of put yourself out there unless that's invited. There are other YouTube videos of people who are like, look at my sexy feet. And then sure, yeah, tell that person their feet look great because they're clearly making porn for foot fetishists. But if it's not being put out there as content, I tell the story in the book, but a few years ago, I was like, I hate wearing shorts in the summer, but I need shorts. I'm gonna buy nylon men's gym shorts, like vintage from the 80s, like the shiny nylon kind, because those look comfy and they're kind of different, and I just don't want to wear standard shorts. I had no idea this was a fetish. Turns out it is. I posted like family, photos, camping trip, whatever. I'm wearing the nylon shorts, and they're just guys, it's always like cis straight guys come on and they post, oh, those shorts are so shiny. And because I'm a fetishist, I can instantly have the radar to see like, oh, you're a fetishist. They're just like, those shorts look really shiny. Are they shiny? Or they'll say, like they look slippery. Are they slip? You can kind of tell by the way they engage. And it's nothing. They're not saying anything sexual, but I know that they know that this, and I'm like, you know what? Delete, because this is a picture of me on a camping trip. I'm not on FetLife posting my pictures of my shiny shorts like that. It's not for you.
Right. I'm not on FetLife with my family photos. I'm like, here's the fish I caught in the lake in my nylon shorts.
Right. Or even on like Bumble or Tinder or something like that. Like, if it's a space that's designated for romantic sexual encounters, great, say something. But if it's not, then don't. Keep it to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
On your own time.
So, right. Well, I mean, it reminds me of, and I've thought really nothing of it, but, I put up a question box on my Instagram every so often that's like, and ask me anything or something like that. And there's one person in particular that's been following me for a really long time. And it's, will you show us your feet? Every time it's, would you be into a foot fetish? It's a version of that. Yeah. And it's like, like, what do your feet look like? And I've just like kind of giggled and moved on, and I think that I'm still going to feel that way about it. I think like I'm going to choose to just be like, you're doing your thing,
I'm not offended,
you're doing your thing.
But I'm also like, my other friends don't need to see you asking about my shorts because this is not that space.
Yeah. Okay. And for the non-fetishists out there that are listening, they're like, where the heck does this come from? Like, is this like, and I think people think this, in general about kink or DS or whatever, where it's like, did some trauma happen or did you like get your first like memory of sexual arousal while you were around this thing? And then it like bonded together. And so that's now, and I think that there's like a more nuanced answer to that.
Yeah. So I would say, unfortunately, the first thing you mentioned, like it's trauma induced. I mean, I'm not going to rule that out, but that's the 50 Shades of Grey model. Like people who are kinky are traumatized. And there's no evidence that that's true. Or I would say there's no evidence that kinky people are any more traumatized or have any more baggage than vanilla people. Everybody's got trauma. You know, most people have some trauma and baggage.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. And so it would sort of also be impossible to do a study because you'd have to ask like all these vanilla people, like, have you ever experienced any kind of sexual trauma? And of course, many of them are going to say yes. And then how that lines up with their sexual desires. I mean, I just think in some ways, vanilla folks have the privilege of not thinking about this stuff too deeply, whereas those of us who feel more marginalized in our sexualities, I think often do spend a lot of time questioning, like, where did this come from? What is it from? Um, I will say I'm a lucky person to have really not experienced sexual trauma in my life. And so I know for myself, that's not where it comes from. The latter thing that you mentioned is one of the theories that's out there right now, which is that basically you got imprinted by some kind of early experience that was, you know, powerful for you, and it became kind of like a crossed signal almost with your like erotic wiring, and they lined up next to each other or something. Another theory, maybe the most popular theory right now, is just like actually your brain is wired a little differently, or your it's an orientation, you know, sort of just the same as now we really believe and feel that, you know, being queer, being gay, or trans is just in you. It's always been true, and you were born that way. And to quote Lady Gaga, and you know, that's what most researchers are sort of thinking now, is that you're sort of born with your sexuality, and your sexuality might be very open and encompass a lot of different things, or your sexuality might be like pretty straightforward and on a you know, somewhat narrow path. And both of those are great, and you're probably not going to change it radically over the course of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Wild. Okay. So my next question is the would you classify, like, this is not hierarchical. That's not the way that I want to ask this question, but like maybe different flavors or different depths to, let's say, kinky people. Like this type of kinky person is like, they live it, they breathe
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
it's a part of who they are. Then this is like the more casual type of kinky person that goes out. Grab that last little piece too while you,
Yeah.
the one that's by your mic.
Yeah. Stay away.
Great. Which I love your hair, by the way. It's just like it's got like a life of its own. I love it.
Does.
If mine were longer, it would be very similar to that, but it's pretty short right now. But anyway, so these different types of like how deep people go into kink. Like maybe they are like weekend warriors, like they just go out and they're kinky on the weekends sometimes, or like once a month, or they're dabbling in kink, like you were the line in the book, and you mentioned it before, the fallacy of spicing up a relationship, and how, you know, they might look at this Cosmo article. I don't even know if is Cosmo still a thing.
Yeah, yeah, and they
I
still
think it
have that
is.
article like every month.
And like Women's Health Mag and Men's Health
Yeah,
Mag and
yeah.
Allure and Elle, and it's like five kinky things to try to spice up your relationship. You know, and so then there's like that kind of subsection that
Mhm.
are just like trialing it out. You know, how would you look at these different like kink depths?
Yeah, levels in a way. I kind of outline levels for fetishes specifically, but I think it can also work for people into other, you know, BDSM kinds of kink. Um y- yeah, there's this sort of like, oh, so I forgot exactly the analogy I used in the book, but let's say you're into like pee play, water's called water sports sometimes. Um, if, you know, let's say you're somebody who's like, oh yeah, you know, I have this new partner and they say they want to pee on me, and I'm like, I'll try anything once. Like you could be that kind of just, you know, Dan Savage style giving and game and like willing to try a thing.
Oh,
Um, or, you know, you might go a little further where you're like, I definitely am interested in some stuff regarding pee. Like I don't know exactly what I'm into about it, but there's something about that that appeals to me. And then there might be a level where you're like, I need to at least be thinking about pee, or like having something involving pee involved in my sexual experiences, or they're not totally satisfying. And then you might be a deeper level where you're like, yeah, that's a requirement for me to kind of get off, is there has to be something about pee, and I want to talk about it, and like my partner needs to know that that's pretty core to who I am. And then at the deepest level, you might just get off on pee without any partner involved at all. Like you could just like go around sniffing public toilets, or like watching video. If you saw somebody in a video or something where it's just someone's peeing on a wall, you're like, oh my God, that's my porn. So yeah, I think there's all of those levels for all different kinds of kink. And we know somebody, for example, who had a partner who was like really into bondage and rope. And he happened to work as a professional rigger, so had a lot of skills in rope. And he was happy to make his partner happy that way, but he always was like, this is my profession. I know how to do this, and I'm really glad it gets her off, but like, I just want to get laid. I'm actually a pretty vanilla guy, and I just want to have like penis and vagina sex after this. The rope part is not turning me on at all, but I'm glad I have the skill that turns my partner on. So I think there's also those folks who are glad to incorporate some kind of kinky play into their sex that then leads to what most of us think of as, sort of conventional vanilla sexual experiences.
Okay, so wide ranging, like a whole little spectrum situation. Because I think some
Yeah,
people are kind of like, if I'm not going around sniffing toilets, then I'm not kinky. Like they don't know that there's these
right.
varying flavors, I don't even know how to really. I keep calling like depth level.
Spectrum, I think, is great. I
Spectrum's
mean,
great.
yeah, it's a spectrum, yeah, of how intensely you need that as part of your sexual experience.
Okay. And so for the people who are more on the like spice up the relationship, um, well, first off, there's nothing wrong with being vanilla and liking vanilla sex,
Yeah,
you
I
know?
always say vanilla is delicious. I
Mm.
love vanilla as a flavor, and it's actually got a lot of depth and complexity to it. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And I know people who are like kind of offended by that term, and I always say, you know what? Being vanilla, it's kind of like being white. You have a lot of privilege in this culture. Like, just be an ally and understand that you've got privilege, because basically the whole culture is geared toward you, and
Yeah.
that you are super lucky, and you will never have to explain or defend your sexuality to a new partner, or worry about your new partner being totally freaked out by what you're into. And how fortunate for you. So just like enjoy, and
Yeah.
also be understanding to those of us who don't have that privilege.
Totally. And I mean, it really does go well with the ice cream analogy because vanilla is accepted everywhere.
Yeah,
you know,
it's
you
always
know,
available.
it's a great base. It mixes well with any other flavor. You can add any topping on top of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think, while some people are like a full on Neapolitan in their kink, or like Rocky Road or pistachio or whatever, cookies and cream, cookie dough, whatever it is, then some people might be more like I'm just going to keep rolling with this analogy, the vanilla with like the chocolate syrup on it. So like more vanilla,
Yeah.
but like occasionally is like, let's go to a play party, or
Yep.
vanilla
Yep.
and is like, let's get the bedroom cuffs out, the under the mattress
Hmm.
cuffs out, or something like that, or
Yeah.
whatever the toy is of, the exploratory in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, all of this stuff is culturally determined by context. So what's kinky, I would say what's kinky is what's non-normative, right? And
Right.
that depends on where you are in time and space. So there have been times, let's say ancient Greece, when it is totally appropriate for adult men to sodomize teenage boys. And that was normative in ancient Greece. And so we're not taught, like now we would say that's pedophilia, and it's completely inappropriate, and it's really taboo. And that's actually a kink that you can never do consensually, because it's not possible. And so you should never do it, act on it. And I talk about this a lot in the book, but like at a different place and time in our history, that was completely acceptable. So, and even like the kind of body types, like let's say it can be considered kinky now to be into somebody who has a beer belly, because we live in this culture that's all about the six-pack abs. Um, but at another time that body shape and type might have been like the most idealized body shape and type that there was.
Totally.
So
Yeah. I told you I'm from New Orleans, and we have Mardi Gras, and
yeah,
there's all the different parades have different deities that are leading it, and like that's like at the center focus, and it just makes me think of Bacchus, where it's this like round
yes,
cherub man that's got his like his leaves, the little crown
the
around his
laurel,
head, and he's
yeah,
just like pouring the wine, and it's just this hedonistic bacchanal, but I mean, that's definitely New Orleans in and of itself. It is one
yep,
of the sexiest, edgiest cities, in
for
the
sure.
States for sure. In the States for sure, that has so much culture and tradition and yumminess. I'm getting ready to host a retreat there. I haven't hosted in a while. But I love my hometown, and I love the kinky fucks there too, because they
Yeah,
feel really integrated in a lot of ways,
absolutely.
and very grounding. And I don't know grounded, and I don't know if that's because of the location and the environment and all of that, and the freedom of expression, all that. Now, if you go like 10 minutes further south, where I'm actually from, it is not the same.
Not so much. Yeah. I mean, yeah, New
No.
Orleans is incredible because I mean, it's got the whole like red light district history. So it's got this long history of sex work and that being really integrated into the culture. It's got, I mean, Anne Rice, like the whole, like all of
Oh
that,
yeah.
her erotica,
Oh
which
yeah.
is super kinky. Yeah, there's so much to New Orleans culture. Absolutely. Uh, yeah. Now I'm forgetting what we were talking about before we talked about New
Oh,
Orleans.
just like the cherub and the man and the
Right. I
hedonistic
was
and the
gonna say
bacchanal and all that.
Bacchus, you could call my fetish a Bacchus fetish, basically. Like that
Great.
idea of somebody overindulging in all the pleasurable things and enjoying it and just celebrating it. That's my fetish.
Great. Well, in New Orleans, there's things that are called either Bacchus something or Bacchanal or
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I guess it is a city that really does indulge in all the things that maybe we're not supposed to indulge in. The food, the sugar, the sex, the music,
Alcohol. Yep.
the nightlife. Like, how could I
Dancing.
forget all the alcohol, the dancing, all of it, all of it.
Yeah.
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 So now I'm
Yeah.
even more excited to get into town. And and I watch my family at times has struggled with every one of the things that I've just outlined, because we've grown up with it. And so it's, at one point it's this really yummy good thing, and then at another point kind of turn a corner and we go just past, feeling good about it or feeling empowered by it, and it's harmful. And so I
Yes.
think that that's in some way is also present in kink and fetish as well.
Absolutely. There has to be that edge or it's not
Yeah.
really kink. Like that element of taboo that you've talked about from the start is that has to be present or yeah, I think we're not really talking about kink.
Do you think that eros, erotic energy, sexual energy, do you think it comes from any particular source or place in the body?
Ooh, I don't know. That is such a good question. I mean, I think it comes from the brain. My sense is because of my experience of being this fetishist whose head has been turned by things that I know, the people sitting next to me don't think of as sexual as all. And it is about like how you process that and yeah, I guess I would say how you process it in your brain. It's
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Cool. And I think maybe some people wind up looking at things that they might be they're interested in their mind and they're interested in their turn on their body, but may not cross over into actuality, like bringing it into their reality, as people looking at people's porn history, what they look at, like they might give themselves permission to look where it gets edgier and edgier, and it's kind of these like fringe things, but then when it comes to their reality, for whatever reason, they're not. And I think for some people it's real. Like there are some things that I fantasized about, which I would love to talk about the differences between maybe fantasy and fetish and that kind of thing, because there's things that I have fantasized about that I then went to do, and I much prefer the fantasy.
absolutely. Yeah. And all kink is rooted in fantasy and many kinks are entirely fantasy. Like you can't actually, you know, um be a puppy, let's say.
Right, right.
But you can
I just thought
say that you're a
alien,
puppy.
like alien porn, like
Right,
hentai
alien.
or
Yeah,
something, where
totally.
it's like you
Yes.
can't actually penetrate yourself with a tentacle.
With a tentacle, right. Yeah. Yeah. And role play is all fantasy too. You're not actually turning into, whatever that is, a vampire and a cop or who knows what. but you're pretending that it's play. I mean, and that's why so much of my book is about like, let's be playful about this in our tone and how we talk about it too, because ultimately all kink is a form of erotic play. And I think we can't forget the play part of it.
Yeah. So kind of the area when we first were talking and then kind of leading into getting into the show, and I think I might have mentioned it towards the beginning, how, on previous episodes we've talked about things like DS and the role of dominance and submission and all of that, and how it's kind of in a lot of ways, the undercurrent of a lot of the varying roles that people could play. Now, kind of makes me think back to the Cosmopolitan L allure when they're like, try these 7 things, and it's, oh, role play. To me, role playing that I'm a pirate or a damsel in distress, or like, that's hard to stay in character. It's hard to go from like, we're normal, we've lived a 5-year relationship, a 10-year relationship, and now I'm just gonna like walk in a French maid outfit, and you're gonna be I'm the Fran Dresser, and you're like Mr. whatever his name was, and you have all the money, and here I am just like cleaning your house, and I'm just gonna play in this role all the way to the end. Like, to me, it's like, it's hard. It's too hard to do that. And to suggest that is silly to me.
Right. Yeah. I think so many people feel that about role play. It's exactly how I used to feel about role play before I really committed to it. And but I would say it is hard, especially if you're trying to use some kind of prepackaged roles. So and that's usually what like Elle and Cosmo are sort of suggesting, like do a French maid and a whatever. But if you really take the time to sort of think about what in the end you're trying to get out of this interaction and this role play, and what role feels comfortable to you, and what flavor of that role feels comfortable to you, then I think it can start making a lot more sense. And I think so the prepackaged, it both comes with like, yeah, it's French maid and so a boss, and here's the costume from the Halloween store, and here you're good to go. But I would say start role playing with no costumes, no toys,